Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true disturbing stories from remote cabins hidden deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Places that look calm, quiet, and safe, right up until the moment they don't. But before we continue, if you're new here, to make sure to subscribe, and don't forget to like and share. It really helps the channel. Thank you for being here. Now then, let's begin. My name is Mark, and I was 31 when I agreed to that trip. I had just been laid off from my job in Atlanta and was still waking up some mornings with the ghost reflex of checking emails that weren't there. Jonas, my old friend from high school, reached out after years of silence. He said he knew a place in the Appalachians where we could disappear for a while and maybe find some clarity. The cabin belonged to his father, who had passed a few years earlier. Jonas described it like a leftover piece of someone's past life. Remote, no cell signal, no internet, barely even marked on maps. That sounded perfect to me. I didn't want anyone to find me, not even myself. We left early on a Thursday and drove most of the day. The last stretch was a single-lane dirt road that wound through pine and birch like it was trying to lose us. By the time we parked, the sun had dipped behind the ridge, and the forest had taken on that muffled hush it gets right before dark. I remember thinking it was too quiet, but I chalked it up to being out of practice with silence. The cabin was bigger than I expected. 2 floors, wrap-around porch, a chimney that had clearly seen use. The front door creaked open like something from a movie, and the air inside smelled like dust and old wood. Jonas walked in like he remembered it all. I followed, waiting for some echo of memory to catch up with me, but I'd never been here before. He showed me around like a real estate agent. Kitchen to the left, fireplace straight ahead, stairs leading up to 2 bedrooms. We each picked a room and unpacked. I chose the one upstairs that faced the woods. There was something odd about that room. It wasn't just the faded quilt or the way the floor slanted slightly near the closet. There was a patch of floorboard near the bed that had a duller tone than the rest, like it had been replaced or cleaned differently. I made a note to mention it to Jonas, but then forgot. We spent the evening with a bottle of whiskey, swapping stories and pretending nothing had changed in 15 years. It felt nice, like rewinding to a version of myself that hadn't existed in a while. But I kept catching Jonas staring into the fire with this faraway look, like he was hearing something I couldn't. It was just after midnight when I first heard it, a soft creak from somewhere downstairs. I paused, thinking it might be the wind or the old wood settling. But something about it didn't sit right. I got up and walked to the top of the stairs. The cabin was dark except for the dying glow of the fireplace. I stood there for a while, listening. Nothing moved. When I came back to bed, I left the door cracked open. Not sure why. Maybe I wanted to hear it again, just to prove I hadn't imagined it. Jonas's door stayed shut the whole night. The next morning, I asked him if he heard anything. He shook his head and said the place always made noises at night. Said it was part of the charm. Then he changed the subject. Later that day, we went hiking along a ridge trail Jonas said his father used to take. It was overgrown but walkable. As we pushed through brush, I spotted what looked like footprints in the mud off trail. Big ones, too fresh to ignore. Jonas glanced at them and kept walking. Didn't even comment. That bothered me more than the prints themselves. He just acted like he didn't see them. We got back late afternoon. While Jonas chopped some firewood, I went upstairs to lie down. That's when I noticed it again. The patch of floor near the bed. I crouched to run my fingers along the seam and felt a slight give, like something wasn't nailed down properly. A creak echoed from downstairs. I stood up quickly, heart racing. Then silence. I tried to laugh it off but couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. That night, we both turned in early. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every little noise amplified. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it again. A soft creak, but this time closer. I held my breath. Then came another sound, like fingers brushing against wood. I sat up and looked toward the patch of floor near the bed. And I swear, Just for a second, I saw it shift. Not from the weight of my foot, not from wind or settling beams. It moved like something had pressed against it from below. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, Jonas could tell something was off with me. I didn't bother hiding it. Over coffee, I told him what I saw, how that floorboard lifted, how I was sure it wasn't my imagination. He listened, too calm, then said he remembered that panel being loose when he was a kid. He offered to pry it up and check, but I told him no. I didn't want to see what might be down there. Not yet. We agreed to go for a walk instead, clear our heads. But as I grabbed my boots near the door, I saw something strange. One of our walkie-talkies, the one I'd left on the windowsill upstairs, was now on the kitchen counter. I hadn't moved it. Jonas said he hadn't either. We looked at each other and didn't say anything more. The trail we took that morning ran behind the cabin and dipped into a hollow choked with fog. It felt like walking through breath. Neither of us talked much. Jonas kept looking over his shoulder. When we returned in the afternoon, the door was slightly ajar, just barely, like someone had pushed it and let it fall back into place. We stood outside for a long moment before going in. Nothing looked touched, but that didn't mean anything. We stayed together after that. Neither of us said it, but we were both scared. That night, we slept in the living room with the fire going. I pushed the couch across the doorway. Jonas fell asleep with a knife in his hand. At some point, I drifted off. Then something snapped me awake. The fire was nearly out, just red coals, and I heard movement upstairs. A slow drag, like someone pulling their feet. I shook Jonas. He didn't wake at first, so I shoved him harder. His eyes opened and he sat up fast. We both listened. The sound grew clearer. Boards shifting above us, a soft creak, then a thud. I felt like I was shrinking into the floor. We didn't move for what felt like an hour. Eventually, the sound stopped. Jonas whispered that it might be an animal. I nodded, but I didn't believe that. Around dawn, we gathered our things. We agreed to leave as soon as the road was dry enough to drive. As I zipped my bag, Jonas stopped and looked at me. He asked if I had gone into the crawl space under the stairs. I told him no. He said he checked it before we arrived, and it was empty. But now there were 2 food wrappers and a plastic bottle lying just inside. The dirt was disturbed. We didn't go hiking that day. We didn't talk much either. We just waited. When the sun dipped low, Jonas stood and said we needed to check the upstairs one last time. I didn't want to, but I followed. We entered my room. He knelt by the patch of floor and looked at me. I nodded. He pried it open with the claw end of a hammer. The board lifted with a groan. Beneath it, there was a hollow space just big enough for someone to curl up in. The smell hit first, then the shapes, blankets, empty food cans, and a single dirt-caked sleeping bag. My stomach turned. I stepped back. Jonas didn't move. Then, behind us, a floorboard creaked. I turn. There is a man in the hallway, half hidden in shadow. His eyes catch the light. His hands are empty, but he doesn't need a weapon. He steps forward. Jonas grabs my arm. We run. We make it down the stairs. I can hear the man behind us. Heavy, barefoot steps slapping the floor. We hit the front door. It won't budge. Jonas slams his shoulder into it. The latch gives. We spill out into the night. The forest is black. No flashlight. No trail. We run blind. Branches whip my face. My lungs burn. I can hear him behind us. Not running now. Just walking. Like he knows we won't get far. We find the road by luck. The car is right where we left it, tucked off the dirt lane under a canopy of trees. Jonas has the keys. He gets the door open, and we fall inside. The engine starts. Headlights carve through the trees. We don't stop driving until we hit the next town. We never went back for our things. Jonas doesn't talk about it. I don't ask. But sometimes, When I wake up at night, I swear I hear it. That soft, dragging sound, like someone moving upstairs. My name is Mark. I was 34 that summer, drifting through the weeks after a bad car accident and a string of sleepless nights that refused to end. I told people I was taking a break from teaching, but the truth was I didn't know if I wanted to go back. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere far from people and routine. So when Ben, an old friend from college, offered his family's unused cabin out in the Appalachian woods, I said yes without thinking twice. It was the kind of isolation you couldn't fake. No phone reception, no internet, and barely any electricity beyond a few bulbs that flickered like they were trying to hold their breath. The cabin sat a few hundred meters off a dirt road, behind a curtain of pine trees that closed in as you approached. It had been empty for years. I found mouse droppings in the sink and dust so thick I could draw in it. But I cleaned up. I unpacked my bag and set up a corner to journal. I told myself I was here to reset, to breathe. And for the first 24 hours, it worked. The first night I slept through like a dead man. No dreams, no tossing, just black. When I woke up, I was standing at the back door. The cold from the handle crept into my fingers. My feet were bare and damp, and when I looked down, I saw a smear of mud on the floor trailing in from outside. The flashlight from the kitchen shelf was in my hand. I had no memory of getting up. I blamed the medication. I had been taking something mild to help sleep since the accident, and maybe it had some weird rebound effect. Still, I spent the morning wiping the floor and shaking off the unease like it was a bad dream. But I started locking the doors after that. Every latch, every window, even the hatch that led to the crawl space under the stairs. I told myself it was just caution, but I also started leaving the hallway light on at night, just in case. The second night, nothing happened. Everything stayed in place. I almost laughed at myself. The third night, I set my phone to record. I placed it on the kitchen table before I went to bed. Just to be sure, I needed to rule out the possibility that I was doing things in my sleep. I woke up in my bed, but the phone was gone. I found it near the back door again. The flashlight was back on the shelf, but my shoes were damp. There was dirt in the carpet. The recording was 5 hours long. Most of it was silence. But somewhere around 2:14 a.m., I heard movement, then breathing, then my voice. Not that way. I said, my voice, hoarse. It's not that way. The next thing I heard was the sound of the door creaking open. Then, nothing. I should have left. I know that now. But at the time, I was too tired, too stubborn, and maybe too curious. That afternoon, I found something scratched under the kitchen table. Letters carved shallow, faded from time. It said, I went out. I came back. Don't let me sleep here again. I traced the words with my thumb. The edges were rough, like someone had done it with a key or a dull knife. There was something frantic about the way it was written. Crooked, uneven, like it had been done quickly. I told myself maybe Ben had done it, or someone before him. But when I called to ask, the signal cut out after 2 rings. I didn't try again. There was a map pinned on the wall above the fireplace, a topographic layout of the surrounding forest. The cabin was marked with a red circle. Later that night, I found an older map stuffed in a drawer beneath the woodpile. Same style, same paper. But on that map, the red circle was in a different place. Same name, same label, but a 3-kilometer difference. I stared at both maps side by side. Then I folded them and slid them under my mattress. I didn't want to look at them anymore. On the 5th night, I drank coffee until my hands shook. I paced the cabin, every light on. I told myself I would stay awake, no matter what. No more blackouts. But sometime after 2, the lights flickered and died. The air went very still. I felt something shift. Not outside, but inside the cabin, like the walls exhaled. Then I heard the back door creak. I turned toward the sound. And there I was, standing at the threshold, 1 foot outside, 1 foot still in. Not a dream, not sleep. Me, or something like me, walking into the woods. I ran after it. The night was colder than it had any right to be. I had no coat, no shoes, just a flashlight and the adrenaline pounding in my veins. I didn't know what I expected to catch, or if I even wanted to catch it, but I couldn't let it walk away like that, like I had no say in my own body. The woods swallowed the light fast. Branches slapped my arms and face. I kept following the sound of footsteps ahead, fast at first, then slowing, then nothing. I stopped near a clearing. My breath came out in ragged clouds. The ground there was flattened, like someone had slept on it. In the center was a ring of stones, and beside it, nailed to a tree, was a piece of paper. It was damp and curled at the corners, but I could still read the words. Same handwriting as the one under the table. Same panic in the letters. It said, "Don't follow me back." That is when I felt it. Not behind me. Beneath me. The ground seemed to shift under my feet. A low vibration. Almost like a hum. I backed away slowly. And when I turned, I realized I didn't recognize the trees. I had run maybe 100 yards from the cabin. But the woods looked wrong. Too wide. Too dense. There was no path. No landmarks. Just forest. I walked in what I thought was the right direction. For 20 minutes. Maybe more. My flashlight started to dim. The cold set into my fingers. Then, suddenly, the cabin was there. But it wasn't right. The lights were on. I hadn't left them on. And there was something in the window. I crept closer. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I looked through the glass. I was inside, standing by the fireplace. My back was to me, and sitting at the table across from that version of me was someone else. I couldn't see their face, just the outline, thin, still, watching. I opened the door. The lights inside flickered and died. The smell hit first, like burnt wood and wet leaves. The air was heavy, too heavy. Then, a voice, low and slow, from the shadows. My voice. "It's not that way. With those body in places and passes." I turned the flashlight on. The room was empty. Just me. Just the quiet. Just the ache in my legs. I grabbed my bag and ran. I didn't lock the door. I didn't care. I just ran until I saw the dirt road. It took a day to get back to town. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I barely knew how. Weeks later, I found something in my coat pocket. A folded slip of paper, yellowed at the edges. It said, "You tried. Don't let me wake up there again." Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. My name is Brian, 36. I'd just come out of a 10-year marriage that should have ended 5 years earlier. I'd spent most of my life in Kentucky, but work had pulled me to Texas, and I'd been stuck there ever since. After the divorce, I couldn't do the city anymore. I didn't want clean parks and traffic and fake plants and lobbies. I wanted real woods, real quiet, real distance. So I used the settlement money to buy an old wooden cabin tucked high up on a ridge near the edges of Linville Falls. It sat at the end of a long dirt road with no signs, no lights, and barely enough space for a single car to pass. The first time I saw it, late in the afternoon with the sun behind the trees and the wind carrying pine, I thought, this is it. This is what I've been missing. The place was falling apart, sure, but it had good bones. A few doors needed rehinging. Some of the locks were rusted shut, and the paint had surrendered to the years. But the frame was solid. I spent the first evening clearing dust, wiping down the windows, and setting up the basics. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer and my old leather journal. There was no phone signal, No internet. Just the chirping of insects and the soft creak of trees moving in the breeze. It felt like I had slipped backwards in time. I didn't realize how much I'd missed silence. And then I heard it. A low, drawn-out sound rolling across the hills. At first I thought it was a wolf, except the end of it wavered in a strange way. Not quite animal, not quite human. I sat up straight, listening. Nothing followed. I told myself it was just the wind warping some natural noise. I'd grown up hearing all kinds of weird echoes in these woods. You don't jump at every sound out here. The next morning, I noticed faint impressions in the dirt behind the cabin. They looked like tracks, but not from anything I recognized. Bigger than human, longer than a bear. I didn't panic, just made a mental note to stay alert. Might have been a wildcat or something large passing through. I didn't think it had any reason to linger. That afternoon I drove into town to restock on a few things. Nails, some canned food, a new padlock. At the gas station, I mentioned the tracks to a local kid who looked about 19. He stopped chewing his gum and said, "If you hear anything out on that ridge, don't go looking for it. Some sounds aren't meant to be followed." He laughed, kind of, but his face didn't match the tone. That night, it came back. The howl, clearer now, closer. This time I was inside, lights off, sitting on the couch with the windows cracked for airflow. I froze when I heard it, longer than before, and rising at the end like it was climbing something. I swear, for 1 second, I thought I heard my name in it. Brian, drawn out, swallowed by wind. I slammed the windows shut. The sound didn't come again that night, but I stayed up until morning. Day 3. I walked the ridge line behind the cabin. The brush got denser past the tree line. I found claw marks on a birch tree, about shoulder height. A faint smell too, musky, earthy, like wet fur. That night, the howl didn't come, but I dreamed of being chased. Something running behind me, snapping branches, always just out of sight. I woke up drenched in sweat. On the 4th night, the silence felt wrong, like the woods were holding their breath. When the sound finally came, I wasn't surprised anymore. But this time, it wasn't far. It was right there, on the ridge, behind the house. Something is out there, and it knows I'm here. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my back against the front door, a hunting knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. Every creak of the wood, every flicker of wind, felt like the start of something worse. I kept telling myself it was an animal, a bear maybe, or some hybrid canine from deeper in the range. But deep down, I didn't believe that. The next morning, I found new tracks in the dirt, closer to the house this time, circling the porch. There were more of them now, heavier, like something had stood there a long while. I reinforced every door and window I could, screwed planks over the back windows, nailed down the loose ones in the bedroom. I knew how to make things hold, thanks to years fixing up junk with my granddad. But that night, as the wind picked up and the sky turned that heavy Appalachian black, I started doubting everything I'd done. The howl came again, not from a distance, right outside. I turned off all the lights, sat in the corner of the living room with the flashlight pointed at the floor. The boards creaked upstairs. I hadn't been upstairs in days. And then, there's a thud. Floorboards flex under weight. Something is inside. I stand, heart racing. The air is thick with pressure, like before a storm breaks. I move slow, holding my breath, every step quiet. I reach the stairs and freeze. The noise stops. Nothing. Then from the far corner of the upstairs hallway, I hear it, my name. Not shouted, whispered, drawn out like a breath through clenched teeth. I don't go up. I back away. I shut myself in the kitchen with every light on. By morning, it's quiet again. I drive into town and ask around. Nobody wants to talk. One old man outside the diner looks me up and down and says, "If it's calling you by name, it's too late." It is Anestus. I leave early that day. Come back before sunset. I sit outside until dusk, just listening. No wind, no birds, no insects, just trees. And then, as the last bit of light drains from the ridge, I hear it again. Low, deep, rolling through the valley like fog. My name. I don't go outside. I don't respond. I don't breathe. Weeks have passed. I haven't heard it again. But every night, I wake up at 3:13 a.m., the time I first heard it from inside. I lie still, staring at the ceiling, listening. And sometimes, I think I hear the trees inhale, waiting. I used to think people exaggerated when they said a sound could break them. That was before I heard my son's voice calling me from the woods in the middle of the night. And the worst part was knowing he was hundreds of miles away, fast asleep at my brother's place in Charlotte. Michael and I had come out to eastern Tennessee, to a gated rental cabin tucked deep into the Smokies. It was meant to be a reset after everything that happened back home. We changed our numbers. We didn't tell anyone where we were going. Only my brother knew, and even he didn't know the full story. A year before, I'd started getting the feeling someone was watching me. At first I thought I was being paranoid, but when someone managed to get into our home's security system and override the locks, that paranoia became fact. The police were useless. Michael suggested moving, but we needed a clean break. The cabin had one-time access codes, no direct address on the rental app, and no cell signal without a signal booster. That's why we chose it. That, and the quiet, the kind of silence that made your own heartbeat sound loud. The first night passed without incident. The second, I had a dream where I heard my daughter's voice calling from the porch. She was crying. I jolted awake, ran to the door. There was no one there. Michael chalked it up to stress. I tried to believe him. On the third night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it again. This time it was my son. "Mom, are you there? Can you come out?" The words were clear, so real they pulled at something deep in me. I froze. Then I ran to the window, but there was nothing, just fog and trees. Unmoving, I called my brother. He put both kids on the phone. They were fine, safe, hadn't left the house. I didn't sleep that night. On the fourth night, the voices came from both sides of the cabin. First, Emma's, from the woods behind. Then Luke's, from near the gravel road out front. They were calling for help. "Please open the door. Mommy, we're cold. We're lost." I locked myself in the bedroom and cried. Michael sat outside the door, unsure whether to comfort or reason with me. I could see it in his face. He wanted to believe I was imagining it. I wished I was too. Then came the fifth night. I was lying in bed with my eyes open. Every nerve in me was buzzing. Around 1 a.m., it started. The voices, but now they used specific phrases. Emma said, "I don't want the green cup. I want the purple one," which was something she used to say when she was 5. Luke called me Mommy Bear, his old nickname for me. And then, right under the window, "Don't you love me? Mom, open up." Michael heard it too. He jumped out of bed. We grabbed our things, ran to the truck. But the hood was popped open. The engine wouldn't turn. Wires had been yanked out. That is the moment it all shifted. We turned and sprinted back toward the cabin. Behind us, the woods lit with movement. And the voices followed, in perfect, terrible harmony. We barely made it back inside. Michael slammed the door shut and twisted the deadbolt. I locked the others. Every window, every entry point. We didn't speak. We just listened. The voices didn't stop. They circled the cabin like a carousel, repeating the same phrases again and again. Emma's giggle, Luke's cry, one after the other, moving closer, until they sounded like they were just behind the walls. Michael whispered, That's not them. I nodded, but hearing him say it out loud shattered something in me. We grabbed the emergency radio and tuned it to static. Nothing. No reception. Not even a weather update. The generator groaned once and went dead. We were in the dark. I tried to text my brother through the signal booster, but it wouldn't connect. We were alone. That was when something tapped the glass in the kitchen. 3 slow taps. Then silence. Michael grabbed the fire poker. I held the flashlight. We moved like people in a nightmare, slow and stupid. We peered into the kitchen. Nothing. Then from behind us, at the bedroom door, Emma's voice again, this time quieter. "You forgot my song. Mommy. You said you'd sing it every night." I felt my knees buckle. That lullaby. I'd only ever sung that to her. Michael dragged me into the bathroom and locked the door. We sat in the bathtub, flashlight off, trying to make ourselves smaller. That is when the voices began calling each other. "Emma, where are you? Luke, come here. We are all waiting. Mommy." They moved like they were searching inside. Then the front door opened. I swear on everything I have. It opened. We heard it creak. Slow, deliberate. Then footsteps. Heavy, human. Michael raised the poker. I held his arm. We listened as the steps passed through the living room, into the kitchen, past the hallway. Then nothing. We waited for an hour before opening the door. The cabin looked untouched, but outside, in the dirt by the front steps, we found prints, 2 small barefoot tracks, a pair of adult boots, and written in the frost on the window, perfectly centered, "Mommy Bear." We left that morning. Later we found out the cabin had no known owner for over a decade. The rental listing disappeared days after we fled. No one at the agency answered our follow-ups. To this day, I cannot hear my children's voices in the dark without flinching. And sometimes, even now, I hear them call from the woods. Soft, patient, wrong. I never thought I would set foot near that cabin again. Not after everything that happened when I was a kid. But my father passed away last year, and somehow the place ended up in my name. A cabin deep in the woods near Renovo, Pennsylvania. Our family's strange little inheritance. I grew up visiting it every summer until I was about 10. My brother Danny and I would spend a week or 2 there, mostly playing in the woods while our dad made repairs. He loved the place. My mom never did. She used to say it smelled like death out there. She refused to stay more than a few nights. And when she was there, she kept us inside after dark. At the time I thought she was just being paranoid. But then there was the summer Danny met Lyle. Danny was 5 then. I was 10. One afternoon he told me his new friend Lyle didn't like me. I assumed he was talking about some imaginary kid, the kind little ones make up when they are lonely. I even laughed. But Danny was serious. He said Lyle stayed near the bed and whispered things at night. He said Lyle didn't want me there. That was the first and only time he ever mentioned the name. I told my mom and her face turned pale. We left the next day. She never explained why, and our dad didn't believe a word of it. The years passed. My mom never returned, and my dad kept going alone each summer. Danny and I never talked about Lyle again. We buried it like kids do, with silence. When the cabin passed to me, I didn't plan to go. But my wife Anna thought it would be good to clean it up, maybe even make it a vacation spot. We have a 6-year-old son now. His name is Owen. We arrived on a clear morning in late spring. The trees looked older than I remembered, like they had been watching all this time. The cabin itself was worn down but intact. Owen loved it right away. We settled in, and I tried not to think about the past. It was just a house, just wood and nails and old memories. Until the 3rd night, Owen started talking to someone. I overheard him whispering in his room. When I asked, he said, "It's just my friend Lyle." It is second, My mouth went dry. I hadn't heard that name in over 30 years. I asked where Lyle was, and Owen pointed to the same corner Danny had all those years ago. I tried to laugh it off, to tell Anna it was just an imaginary friend. But that night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the dark corner in Owen's room. The next day, I found one of my old sketchbooks in the attic. Inside were childish drawings of stick figures with twisted arms and too many fingers. On every page, the same name scribbled in crayon, Lyle. I don't remember drawing any of it. That night, I woke up to find Owen standing by our bed. He looked calm, but his voice was wrong when he whispered, "Lyle says you are too old now." With that king on, re-720 show. I jumped out of bed as Owen turned and walked toward the balcony. He started climbing the railing. My heart stopped. I ran and pulled him down just before he tipped over. He fought me like he didn't know who I was. The cold that filled the room was the same cold I felt as a child. And I knew Lyle had never left. The next morning, I called Danny. I told him everything. He didn't react the way I expected. He said he didn't remember any of it. I asked him to come to the cabin. I needed to know if it would stir anything in him. Maybe if he saw the place again, it would come back. He agreed to come up for the weekend. When he arrived, he acted like it was any other old house. He joked about the dust, complimented the view, and even played with Owen a little. But that night, I found him standing at the edge of the woods, staring into the trees. He was murmuring something. I called to him and he didn't answer. When I touched his shoulder, he blinked and turned to me, confused. "I thought I heard something," he said. He looked shaken. That night, I slept with one eye open. Just before dawn, I woke up to the sound of the back door creaking. I found Danny walking barefoot into the woods, whispering, "Lyle." And I pulled him back inside. He had no memory of it the next morning. That was when I told Anna we were leaving. She did not argue. We packed our things. We tried to make it seem casual for Owen. As I was loading the car, I called for him. No answer. I found him by the edge of the clearing, kneeling next to the roots of a giant tree. He was whispering. I got closer and heard him say, "Lyle says you can stay now. He found someone else. It is Sapphoration's end quest." I knelt beside him and asked who Lyle was talking about. Owen just pointed at the base of the tree. "Down there," he said. There was a narrow opening between the roots. I looked and saw something that froze my blood. A child's shirt, old, rotting, one I had worn as a boy. Then I heard a whisper, my own voice, coming from inside the earth. "You said you'd never leave me." Eight. I grabbed Owen and we ran. We left everything behind. We never went back. Owen stopped mentioning Lyle after a few weeks. But sometimes I find his drawings. They always show the same thing, a tree with a mouth, and a person looking out from inside. Sometimes I think about what I saw, what I heard. I ask myself if Lyle was ever a friend, or just a mirror of something broken in us. Passed down, waiting. I don't have answers. Just that one name, and the feeling that he is still listening. That one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. Now, story 6. I was not the kind of guy who ever burned out. I fed off momentum, thrived under pressure, and believed there was no such thing as too much work. But sometime last fall, I hit a wall so hard it rattled everything. I lost my rhythm, my focus, and then something worse. The will to keep pushing. I tried powering through it like I always did. But this time, it was like trying to run through water. So I took a step back, and, for the first time in my life, admitted I needed rest. Real rest. Not just a weekend off with emails still buzzing. I started looking online for retreats. Maybe some guided wellness stuff. But most of it felt fake. Overpriced. Too pretty. not grounded. Then, I saw this post about an off-grid cabin in the Smoky Mountains. 1 week, total isolation, no phone signal, no internet, just you and the woods. It felt extreme, but it also felt right. My girlfriend was supposed to come too, but 2 days before the trip, she got a call back for a job she'd been chasing all year. There was no way I'd ask her to pass that up. So I went alone. I told myself I could handle it. I was nervous, sure, but I'd grown up in a rough neighborhood and figured I had enough street smarts to manage a few days in the wild. My city instincts would keep me sharp, and maybe the quiet would do some good. Maybe it would knock something loose. The cabin was better than I expected. Clean, compact, built with solid wood and a tight structure. It had one of those fake bookshelves that was actually a cabinet full of first aid gear and power tools. Whoever owned the place clearly cared about security. I spent the first few days hiking, reading, just letting my brain go still. It felt good, better than good. I slept more in those 3 nights than I had in a month. And for a little while, I even forgot why I had been so worn down. But then came the 4th night. It started small. I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I heard a click. Mechanical, precise, followed by a low whir. The unmistakable sound of a camera adjusting focus. My hand froze midair. I turned slowly, expecting to see something outside the small bathroom window. Just forest and moonlight. But the sound had come from inside. I did a slow sweep of the room, heart kicking hard. I saw nothing. But that noise, it had been real. I grew up dodging surveillance in every form. I knew that sound better than I knew my own voice. I walked the cabin, locking windows again, checking the doors, half laughing at myself. Maybe it was a branch outside. Maybe I was just spiraling. But that unease did not go away. I built a fire in the main room and sat in front of it, trying to breathe. The flames danced, casting shadows across the bookshelf. And then I saw it. A flicker of light, the tiniest glint between 2 hardback spines. I stood up, walked over. There was a fake book on the shelf, something that did not belong. A hollow container, meant to blend in. When I pulled it off the shelf, my gut dropped. It had a tiny lens built into the spine. There was no question what it was. Someone had been watching me. I tore through the cabin and found 3 more. One in the living area. One tucked into the vent in the bathroom. One screwed into the baseboard of the bedroom. All pointed inwards. I felt exposed. Filthy. Violated. Someone had recorded everything. I packed essentials into a bag. Wallet. Keys. A phone. My Glock. And stepped outside. My car was parked behind the cabin, half covered by trees. I told myself I'd sleep there until sunrise, then leave and call the cops from the nearest town. But something in me knew. I was not alone out here. Not anymore. The next morning, I packed everything I could find into one bag. Essentials only. My body moved out of instinct more than logic. Like some part of me knew the clock had already started ticking. The trail camera was the tipping point, but the sense of being hunted had been building for days. I mapped out the nearest ranger station, about 5 miles north, hoping I could reach it before sunset. I figured I could make it with enough water and maybe a little luck. I left the cabin just after dawn. The trees swallowed me fast. I kept my pace steady, sticking to the trail even when it narrowed. Every few hundred feet, I looked behind me. Nothing, but my stomach stayed clenched. Midway through the hike, I found another trail camera. It was hidden just off the main path, tucked behind a patch of mountain laurel. And it was still warm. That is when I knew. Someone was watching me in real time. I bolted, heart hammering. I crashed through the brush, ignoring the trail, ignoring direction. Just get away. Just move. Twigs clawed my arms. I slipped and fell hard once, scraped my knee, but scrambled back up. My phone buzzed in my pack. I didn't stop to check. I didn't want to know what it said. The forest around me thickened. Then I saw it. A cabin. Not mine. Not on any map I had seen. Just sitting there in the woods like it had been waiting for me. The door was open. I should have run. God. I know that now. But I stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath my boots. Empty. Dusty. But clean in a strange way. No furniture. Just bare walls and one small cot in the corner. Then I saw the laptop, sitting on a crate, open and glowing. And the screen. It showed live feeds. All from inside my cabin. Every room. Every angle. There was audio too. I heard myself talking to my girlfriend on the phone 3 nights ago. I heard myself humming in the kitchen. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. Then, a noise behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But the door was now closed. I grabbed the laptop, hoping to carry it out, but the screen flickered and went black. Smoke started rising from it. It fried itself right there in my hands. I bolted. I did not care where I was going. Just away. But I didn't get far. The woods shifted. Just slightly. The trees seemed unfamiliar. I had lost the trail. And then I saw him. A man in a black jacket. No facial expression. No urgency. Just walking toward me through the brush like he was out for a Sunday stroll. I turned and ran again. But I heard it. His footsteps behind me. Not fast, but constant. I stumbled onto a gravel path. My car. Somehow, impossibly. I had looped back. I jumped in, slammed the lock, started the engine. Headlights flared on. And there he was, standing at the tree line, still watching. I drove. I didn't stop. Not for gas. Not for anything. Later, at the sheriff's office, I told them everything. They drove out, but of course, the strange cabin was gone. No sign of any cameras in my cabin either. Just clean walls and unplugged outlets. They said it was stress. A breakdown. But a week later, a package arrived. No return address. Just a single item inside. One of the books from my shelf. Hollowed out. And inside it, a lens. My name is Liam Carter. And back then, I was 29. Working as a metal fabricator in Pittsburgh. Long hours. Loud shop floors. And the kind of exhaustion that made you forget you used to like life. Evan and Mark were the last pieces of my old world that still felt familiar. We made a promise years ago to take at least one trip a year. Just the 3 of us. Before life scattered us for good. That year, Evan found a cabin in West Virginia through a co-worker. A simple 1-story place tucked at the end of an old dirt road with a narrow porch facing a wall of thick forest. When we pulled up, the sun was already dropping, painting the trees dark gold. I remember thinking the quiet felt heavy, like something pressed down on it from above. We brought coolers, firewood, and the usual weekend gear. Nothing about the place looked threatening. The cabin was old but cared for. The kind you could picture someone restoring by hand over 20 years. Even the air smelled cleaner out there. For the first time in a long while, I felt myself actually relax. That first night we grilled on the porch and joked about how out of shape we all were. No one talked about work. We laughed like we used to in high school. The kind of laughter that cracked something open. When I went to bed, the only sound was the wind brushing the siding like fingertips. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, we hiked out along a ridge trail Evan found on a map. It was colder than we expected. The kind of cold that made the forest feel older. I remember looking at the trees and thinking they felt alive in a way the city never did. We stopped at a lookout point and took a picture. Something we had not done in years. That evening, as we made dinner, I felt the first wrongness. Just a flicker. Leaves shifting outside at a moment when everything else was still. I walked onto the porch and stared into the dark tree line. There was nothing there. Not a single shape or rustle. But the silence had a weight that felt unnatural. I told myself I was just tired. We sat around the fire that night, talking until the flames dropped low. I stepped out to grab another log, and for a second I felt sure someone was standing in the dark, close enough to touch. I shook it off and went back inside. I did not want to be the one who said something weird first. Not when we had all come here to escape stress. But night 3 changed everything. We were inside by the fire again, half asleep on the couches, when we heard a noise outside. At first it was just a faint crunch like someone stepped on dry branches. The sound repeated, slow and deliberate. All 3 of us went silent in the same instant, like our brains recognized the threat before we did. Evan grabbed the flashlight. Mark stood behind him. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, more out of instinct than bravery. The beam of the flashlight cut through the trees in a thin white line. For a moment we saw nothing but trunks and darkness. Then he appeared. A man stood 30 meters away, barely inside the edge of our light. He was still, completely still. His clothes were dark enough that the forest swallowed his shape except for his face, or at least the pale suggestion of one. He was watching us. Evan called out something like, "You need help," but the man did not react. He simply turned and walked back into the trees without a sound. The darkness closed around him like he had never been there. No one spoke for a long minute. When we went back inside, we tried to laugh it off, saying he might be a hunter or some local guy taking a shortcut home. But none of us believed what we were saying. You can feel when a moment shifts something inside you, and that moment had shifted everything. Around 2 in the morning I woke to a sharp thud above my head, the kind of sound a heavy body makes when it lands. I sat up. Evan was already looking at me from the other couch. Mark whispered, "Roof." Half her sound, but said, "We have frozen datans." A second thud shook dust from the ceiling. Then we heard it. A short, breathy laugh. That was when we knew he was up there. Evan grabbed his keys. Mark snatched the duffel with our phones and wallets. I swung the door open and we sprinted across the porch to the truck. The forest felt alive behind us, like it shifted closer with every step. As I turned the ignition, headlights washed over the cabin, and I saw him. He stood on the roof, silhouetted against the trees. Then he dropped to the ground in one smooth movement. In that instant, I was fully awake. He starts running toward the truck. We pull away. He gets closer. I floor the gas. The tires skidded in the dirt and we shot down the narrow road into darkness. I did not look back. I could not, because I knew he was still running. We did not stop until we hit the first paved road. No one said anything. Mark just stared out the window, gripping the handle above the door like we might fly off the road at any moment. Evan's knuckles were white on the wheel. We reached a gas station about 40 minutes later. The lights felt harsh and artificial, like they were trying to cover up the night. I walked to the restroom and locked the door behind me, breathing like I had run a marathon. When I looked in the mirror, my face looked pale and wrong. We called the county sheriff from Evan's phone, which finally had signal. The dispatcher sounded calm but confused. She said no recent calls had come from that area. No cabins had been reported broken into. Nothing matched what we described. We told her about the man, the rooftop, the laugh, and she hesitated, just long enough to make my stomach twist. Then said she would send someone out in the morning. We knew that meant we were on our own for the night. We checked into a roadside motel with peeling paint and a single buzzing light outside. I couldn't sleep. Every sound made my body jerk awake. At one point I got up and pushed a chair under the doorknob, just in case. Sometime after 4, I heard it. The soft crunch of gravel outside our room. Slow, measured. I sat up in bed and held my breath. A shadow passed across the thin curtain. Then came the knock. 3 light taps on the door. Not frantic, not forceful. Just calm, like someone knocking on a neighbor's door in broad daylight. I reached for my phone and texted Mark in the other bed. "Did you hear that?" End quote. To Percivalide, his reply came instantly. "Yes. 19 staying. We didn't move. We didn't speak." The knock didn't come again. When the sun rose, we packed and left without checking out. We never spoke about what happened in the cabin again, but we knew. A week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed the three of us standing on the porch that first night, beers in hand, smiling at the camera. But we had never taken that picture. And the angle, it was from the trees. My name is Caleb Ross, and this story takes place during the summer of 2021. I had been working remotely since the pandemic started, and after more than a year of screen fatigue, social withdrawal, and mounting anxiety, I hit a wall. My therapist told me I needed time away from devices, and honestly, I agreed. I craved silence. Real silence. So when my cousin Lucas offered me a week at a family-owned cabin in the Catskills, I said yes before he could even finish the sentence. It belonged to his uncle, who rarely used it anymore and didn't mind loaning it out. The cabin was in a remote area, off-grid, no Wi-Fi, barely any phone service, and a 20-minute drive to the nearest store. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sort of anticipation, not dread, for the isolation. I packed a duffel with clothes, brought a few books I had been meaning to read, and drove up on a Monday. The directions Lucas gave me were almost comically simple. Drive until the paved road ends. Keep going, another 5 miles on gravel. Then turn left at the big rock shaped like a bear. I thought he was joking until I saw the rock. Yeah, it actually looked like a bear sitting down. Past that, it was nothing but forest. The cabin itself was smaller than I imagined. One main room, a bedroom in the back, and a bathroom with plumbing that worked as long as I remembered to top off the water tank from a barrel outside. The windows were old and drafty, and the front porch creaked like an old man's knees. But it had charm. And for the first couple of days, it was exactly what I needed. I woke up with the sun, made coffee on the stovetop, and read outside until the afternoon heat forced me back indoors. There was a short trail behind the cabin that led to a tiny clearing. Nothing special, but quiet enough to hear my own thoughts again. The kind of place where time moves slower, and you forget the sound of your own phone. But on the third night, something changed. I was brushing my teeth at the tiny sink in the bathroom when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was a raccoon or some small animal moving through the brush outside. But then it repeated. 3 sharp, evenly spaced knocks, on the far side of the cabin wall. I froze, toothbrush still in hand, foam gathering in the corners of my mouth. I waited. Nothing followed, just silence. I walked into the main room and stood by the window that faced the direction of the sound. The trees stood still. Nothing moved. I told myself the wood must have settled or something had fallen from a tree. It was probably nothing. But I didn't sleep well that night. Every creak in the walls, every rustle outside made my pulse jump. I kept checking the windows, expecting to see something, but I never did. The next day, I found footprints. I barely slept that night. My body was exhausted, but my brain would not let me close my eyes. Every little noise felt magnified. The creak of the old wood, the whisper of the wind through the trees outside, even the slow ticking of the clock on the wall, they all felt like warnings. Around 3 a.m., I finally dozed off, knife still clutched in my hand, light still on. When I woke up a few hours later, the sun had started to rise. I stayed inside, made coffee, and stared out the window for over an hour, waiting for movement. But the forest was still, almost too still. I wanted to believe it had all been some weird dream or misunderstanding. Maybe I was overtired, stressed, and imagining things. But the memory of his eyes, those wide, almost inhuman eyes locked onto mine, would not leave me alone. I could still feel them, watching me from some corner of the trees. I packed quickly. I did not even finish my coffee. I just threw everything into my bag, locked the cabin as if that would help, and got into my car. The drive out felt longer than usual. Every turn in the dirt road felt like it was leading me back toward him. But it was not over. 3 weeks after I got home, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photo. A photo of me, sitting on the porch of the cabin, drink in hand, staring into the forest. I had never taken that photo. There was no one else there. I called the police. They took it seriously at first, but without any evidence of a crime, there was not much they could do. I replaced the locks on my house. I bought security cameras. I started sleeping with the lights on. Every so often, I still check the cabin's listing online, just to see if anyone else stays there, just to see if anything happens to them. So far, nothing. But that doesn't mean it's over. Not really. Because I still feel it sometimes. The same feeling I had on that porch. Like someone is watching. Like someone is still out there. And maybe they are. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.